Okay, I think everybody's in. Good evening or good afternoon, everybody. It's a delight to have you at this very special event on payments in the metaverse. My name is Deb Baxley. I'm one of the co-founders of NIPay and the CFO on the board of directors for NIPay. And we really appreciate you coming to this event. It's a really interesting topic, as evidenced by the number of people who registered. Just a little brief history of NIPay if you haven't been to our events before. We founded in 2010, and unfortunately we missed having our 10th birthday party because that would have been in 2020. In 2020 we started having virtual events. Up to then we've been having in-person events approximately every month or two, where we'd have some hors d'oeuvres and some wine and then a great panel discussion. So we've tried to recreate that experience as much as possible virtually, and hopefully within the next couple of months we'll be back in person. Being part of NIPay is one of the best things that's ever happened to me, because I met all of my business partners through NIPay and the company that we formed, a company of payments consulting. I will let the moderator introduce the speakers, but I just wanted to mention that I met Amanda Fraga from Mastercard a few months ago. It was an in-person event. It was a women in networking event, and she's got this really interesting job at Mastercard where she does research and insight. And she gave this incredible talk about the metaverse, and it just blew me away. It was like so weird and wonderful at the same time. So I said, we have to have an NIPay event on the metaverse. Interesting factoid, because we mentioned in the write-up that Facebook changed its name to Meta. Many of you probably recall there was a bank called Meta. It was kind of a fintech bank, and I forget what they changed their name to, but Mark Zuckerberg had to pay them $60 million for their name. So I think that's kind of funny. I'd like to also thank we have two annual sponsors, Davis White Tremaine, DWT, and Further Advisory. So many thanks to them for making all of this possible. The format for this evening will be approximately 15-minute panel discussion, followed by a Q&A. And then after the Q&A, please hang on. We'll have another half hour or so of networking at the end, where we put people in smaller groups of like 6 to 8, so you get to talk to a smaller group of people. I think everybody's on mute right now. So during the panel, keep yourselves on mute. And if you don't mind, please turn your cameras off so we can save on bandwidth and so it's not so distracting. And for questions, you can either type into the chat, and I'll be monitoring the chat, or you can unmute yourself and ask the question, in real time, if you'd like, when we get to that part. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to our fantastic all-female panel and moderator, Anastasia Traylor, who will introduce the topic. Thank you.
Thanks, Deb, and good afternoon, good evening, everyone. So wonderful to be with you today. I am Anastasia Traylor. I'm a partner in Deloitte's financial advisory practice. I focus on the financial services industry, and in my role, I've worked with a lot of payments companies. We work together on optimizing their payment operations to be more sustainable and well-controlled. I also lead finance-focused offerings in our blockchain and digital assets offering. Today, I'm joined by a wonderful panel: Amanda Fraga from Mastercard. We have Nellie Gregorian from Fluent Research, and Libby Rodney from the Harris Poll. And I'll let the speakers, the panelists, introduce themselves a little bit more as we get started on this very exciting topic of payments in the metaverse. So we'll start with something fun. If you could imagine, this is going to be a round robin to start. If you can imagine a time when you were very passionate about something, but you were ahead of the curve. So maybe others have told you that it's not possible, or it is a little bit far-fetched, but at the end of the day, it did happen and became reality. So if you could reflect on what that was and what you learned from it, and perhaps anything that resonates now in the stage of the evolution of the internet and where we are today. So Nellie, you're the first square on my Zoom here, so I'll start with you. If you don't mind introducing yourself before sharing your perspective.
Thank you so much, Anastasia. Hello, everyone. I'm Nellie Gregorian. I'm the founder and president of Fluent Research. We are a data and insights-driven consulting firm headquartered in New York City, although we operate around the country and all over the world. Actually, we've conducted research in over 70 countries around the world. We work for clients in a variety of different industries, but we are particularly known for our expertise conducting research with children, teens, and families, especially at the intersection of media, technology, education, and entertainment. So this is Metaverse is a very close kind of topic to our hearts, and we've been kind of living in that world for quite a while. I'm very excited about the opportunity to speak today. Also going back, Deborah, to what you mentioned at the very beginning, I recall being at one of the first, if not the first, NYPay meetings back in New York City. Ron Mazurski at the time, we did a little bit of work together, collaborated, invited me to one of the sessions. So your group is also very close to my heart. Anyways, in terms of any kind of predictive powers, I don't particularly think that I have the foresight of knowing what's going to change in terms of the, trends, especially as far as technology is concerned, because they're so far ahead of me. But I'm going to date myself, but I'm going to say that back in the day, I was one of the early adopters of Apple products, Apple computers. And at the time, I remember everybody was telling me the corporate world would never move to Apple products, Apple computers. And I'm talking about the old-fashioned desktop Apple computers sitting on your desk. But I just really felt that the beauty of their hardware and their software and the style was just, I couldn't believe that it wouldn't be adopted widely by the corporate world, by the institutions of higher education. And it happened. And it's just, if anything, obviously Apple is the most valued company in the world. And if anything that in terms of the lessons and takeaways, I would say that style and beauty and aesthetics is a very important feature and aspect of any technology. And I think that it really, if it's done right, consumers will always appreciate it and value it.
Thank you, Nellie. Amanda, can you go next?
Yeah, great to meet you all. And Deb, yes, wonderful to be reunited and excited to be here. I lead up NAM Insights at Mastercard. I've been there for a little bit over a year. So financial services and technology is new to me, but I think what I bring to the conversation is really understanding the consumer perspective and the cultural lens of what's shifting. So a big part of myself and my team's role is to really identify some of the cultural changes that are happening in the world and bring that knowledge into the organization as thought leadership to direct kind of some of our initiatives internally, and also be able to bring that knowledge to partners. So really excited to bring some of that metaverse knowledge here in this conversation today. And my story of being a little ahead of the curve. So before working at Mastercard, I worked at a very large live entertainment company. And about maybe 8-10 years ago, there was a conversation around whether we should have streaming for live music events because, would it cannibalize people going to the live events or not? And the decision was a nay. But I was also there during the beginning stages of the pandemic, and it was really incredible to see just how quickly and people could move towards a necessity, right? Having that communal experience, shifting to live streams, seeing artists, perform from their living room, be interacting and engaging with consumers and fans, through the chat. It was really amazing to see. It was a really tough time, obviously, for everyone during the pandemic, but to see that innovation happen so quickly was pretty fantastic.
Thanks, Amanda. Libby, would you mind sharing your perspective?
Yeah. No, hi, everyone. It's nice to be here. I'm Libby Rodney. I'm the Chief Strategy Officer of the Harris Pool. I specifically work on a practice around thought leadership and building the future and helping leaders navigate the next 5-10 years out. And I do a lot of work with Amanda, so she brought me on. And we've been doing a lot of work on the metaverse, but we kind of focus on all different kinds of topics that are colliding and intersecting in our future. To answer the question, I was at Razorfish back in the day before there was social media, or as the advent of social media happened. So I remember being in rooms with clients and trying to tell them about Friendster and MySpace and Facebook, and being laughed out of meetings because the technology was silly or just for kids. And so I think it actually reminds me a lot of the metaverse, and that's what kind of excites me about talking about it today.
Thank you, Libby. Actually, the first question I think would be great if you could help us out with, because we want to level set, and sounds like you're already very much in this space. So can you please share with the audience what the metaverse is, and maybe a little bit more importantly, what it isn't?
Yeah, it's a great question. We spent a lot of time interviewing experts across the board about what is the metaverse. So the consensus of what I've learned, because it's a consensus building process, everyone has a bit of a different opinion, but that it is inherently the evolution of the next internet that will be more immersive, 3D, interoperable, and importantly, social. So to have all these things happen, there's got to be a lot of advancement in technology, the systems in where we operate, the infrastructure, but it's kind of like we're at the first stage, the way that we were with social media. So we're about 10 years out. So importantly, it's really important to think what it's not. It's not one platform or one device. It's not Facebook, it's not a VR headset. And that would be like saying that Web 1 or the internet was AOL, or that Friendster was social media, or Facebook was. It's not going to be one platform and anything. I think the biggest point to recognize it is that it's the unfolding of the next internet, and there's going to be a lot of different players, and there's a lot of problems to solve in that future.
Thank you. That's very helpful. I think we'll talk a little bit about some of the challenges in a couple of questions. But let's maybe start with who is currently engaging with the metaverse. Nellie, could you share your perspective on that, and maybe just speak a little bit of how it's different or perhaps adjacent to things like virtual reality, augmented reality, so that it offers our audience some point of reference?
Yes, absolutely. So as Libby said, metaverse, there are a lot of conversations, a lot of dialogue that's going on among experts, and there's certainly a lot of various opinions, but some of the key defining features are exactly what Libby mentioned. It's 3D, it's immersive environment, it's always on, it's persistent, and it's interoperable. So it's not necessarily a single technology like VR or AR or XR, but those are rather the building blocks of a metaverse that is a much larger universe where a variety of different microverses can exist and operate and be interoperable. In other words, you as a user can be navigating from one world to another seamlessly. So when we think about metaverse in those terms, it's also very important to keep in mind that it doesn't exist. It's still the metaverse in and of itself. It's still a work in progress. It's still just a concept. We don't have anything that truly could be named a metaverse, but we have some worlds, some environments that approximate, or at least give us a taste of what it might look like. And the closest we come to it is games like Roblox and Minecraft and Fortnite. So those are the worlds where kids are immersed, and they're immersed in those environments for a variety of different things, different activities. There is this misconception that kids, for example, Roblox, I would argue that Roblox is perhaps the closest that it comes to Metaverse, because it's immersive. It's not one game. It's a platform where users actually create their games, and they create multiple games. There are over 20 billion games actually in the world of Roblox, and users can play with just one password. They enter the world of Roblox, and they can go from one game to another, and they create those games themselves. They have their own currencies, so it's an economy of itself. So it's perhaps the closest we have to a metaverse today. But however, it's not a metaverse because it's just a contained world of Roblox. And it's a world where you cannot, for example, transition from Fortnite and go to Roblox. And everything that you own in Roblox, your currency, which is Robux, or your skins, your items that you have purchased, it just stays in that world. And in the kind of an accepted vision of the metaverse, you would be able to have everything that you own would be transferable among those different multiverses. So you could be, let's say there is a Facebook environment universe, or there is a Roblox universe. They could be all kinds of, whether it's decentralized, whatever it might be, you would be able to seamlessly operate and use your own identity, which is constant and persistent, and your assets, whatever they might be. Another important thing about who is engaging with that, of course, it's kids and tweens and teens. And that's also has a lot of implications when we think about the metaverse that is going to, again, experts believe that we're at least 5 to 10 years before the metaverse is going to be actualized. These are the people who are now basically they're kickstarting that metaverse movement, that transition to fully actualized metaverse. And these are people who are not only playing games on those platforms, but they're actually socializing, they're communicating, they are engaging in economic activity, they're collecting, they're trading, they're building something. And some of them are making money off of it. So this is the generation, the alpha generation, Gen Z generation, that is being primed to become the major users of metaverse. And by the time the metaverse gradually exists, and by the way, I don't believe that there will be one day when, metaverse is in existence. As with any technology, is going to be some kind of gradual transition where it will become fully adopted and will be in a world that will be the closest to metaverse, but it's probably going to be continually evolving. But this generation of users, those are the kids who are engaging with Fortnite and Roblox and Minecraft today. They're going to be the drivers of that. And by the time it's done, it will be a nature to them. They will be metaverse natives, the way we call them the digital natives today. They will be fully empowered and fully equipped to be metaverse citizens.
Thank you, Nellie. My 7-year-old, who is obsessed with Roblox, already told me he's very excited about the metaverse because then he can play with his cousin who's in Texas in the same room.
Yes.
So paying attention.
Exactly, yes. And he's going to be the one who will probably build at least a portion of that metaverse once we get there. At least he's yeah.
So there's one clarifying question on the word worlds that you used. So the question is, should we think of worlds as ecosystems? I think the answer is yes, given the currency and economy component.
Using the worlds.
Yeah.
Well, the idea is that you may have metaverse is much bigger than just one world. So there will be a variety of multiverses that are part of that metaverse. So if we take as a, which is not a perfect, approximation, but if we think about internet today, Web 2.0, where we have different websites, and different, different websites or different internet apps or whatever it might be. You can pretty much navigate between them. But every time you move, for example, from Facebook to Instagram, from Instagram to Google search, from Google search to another app or Google Maps, you have to more or less exit that world. You have to enter your password. You have to, in some cases, if it's a gaming platform, to create your own identity. And everything that you collect in one world or in one website, it stays there. It's not transferable. The idea of the metaverse that you might as well have different kind of worlds or different verses, multiverses, or whatever it might be, but it has to be persistent. Your identity exists whether you're there or not, and all your assets are transferable, and you don't need to create another login information or another password to move between those different worlds, because you're part of that world, that universe. So it's not an ideal, perhaps not an ideal approximation, but basically it gives you a sense of how it might exist, except that it's 3D, it's fully immersive, and you should be able also not be limited not only to one type of technology, whether some of it could be VR, some of it could be AR, but also to one device. It should be accessible to people through a variety of different devices. It could be using your headset, or you should be able to navigate that world, that universe, both from your console or your headset, or whatever glasses, AR glasses we might have at the time, or your phone, whatever device you have to be able to access that world and basically do whatever it is you choose to do there.
Thank you. All right, let's layer in the payments angle here. So Amanda, if we look ahead beyond the initial engagement through entertainment and gaming, what could the metaverse be for a consumer in the future beyond those two use cases? And then what is the opportunity perhaps for commerce and payments in the metaverse?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a great question. And entertainment and gaming obviously are always more on the fridge, on the cutting edge of innovation, right? They're environments that kind of have this social connected entertainment benefit. So that's obviously an area where consumers love to surpass the adoption curve of technology and dive in because they're getting such a great reward. But we're already seeing so many different brands come into the metaverse and engaging in different ways, especially I would say in retail right now. So for example, there's brands like Balenciaga, Nike, etc., that are having fashion shows in the metaverse. And they're thinking about commerce in two different ways. So in some environments, you may log into this metaverse fashion show, see someone wearing something, and you absolutely have to have it. And you can order that to have it physically. So we call that crossover commerce. And you can almost imagine yourself, I'm sure there's plenty of folks here who might be riding a Peloton, right? Maybe a Balenciaga fashion show is a little bit far off or something in our everyday life. But let's say you're riding your Peloton bike and you happen to love what your instructor is wearing that day. Having the option to be able to order that item in the experience direct and have it shipped to you could be a more realistic option in that direct to commerce kind of world. And then the other area that we like to think about is this direct to avatar type of shopping as well. And, the idea of, we've already got so many items in our own life. Are we truly going to have this other digital twin in this verse who we want to dress up and wear certain things and have a certain style, etc.? That might seem kind of far off for many of us here in this room. But I recently was on a panel with a Gen Z female who worked at Bank of America, and she said that year, we're in a pandemic, she spent more on her virtual goods and skins than she did on physical clothing and apparel. So I think the whole idea of the metaverse, I say, the two were suspend disbelief. I think the same way that you did when, 20 years ago, when the internet came out and you're like, no, this is crazy. Why would I be on here? You kind of have to put yourself back in your shoes of 1995. We're in the same place, but for the metaverse. And it just opens up so many more opportunities for commerce to take place. Besides retail, travel, healthcare, it really will extend into all the different industries, and, help with information storage, supply chain information. It can help with ensuring that creators are paid for their goods and all the versioning of their artwork and goods. So there's lots of opportunities for commerce, and be able to track those transactions. It'll be really interesting because there is, it's still a little bit of the Wild West in seeing how this all unfolds, because the main point of the metaverse is for it to be a decentralized environment and to have all these different verses. So it will be interesting to see how commerce plays out in this space. But the other interesting thing is that obviously people are engaging in crypto more than ever as well. And so, we really want to think about, well, how can we give consumers more choice in terms of and accessibility in terms of how they buy their crypto? How can we, allow them to do that through their credit and debit card? And so Mastercard has some partnerships to enable people to have the choice in terms of how they want to pay, using crypto, buying NFTs, etc., but still have the backing and trust and safety and security behind that transaction. So yeah, so I think, it has the opportunity of being a twin economy. And so I think that idea of suspending disbelief and thinking about that this other world can exist, and that we can shape it. It, like Nellie said, this isn't an on-off switch. It's something that is going to be evolving, and we actually have control of how we want to build it out.
Thank you, Amanda. Libby, maybe we'll pull on this thread of payments specifically and talk a little bit about how payments are made in the metaverse now, or in these examples. As Nellie mentioned, it's not really metaverse fully. Are people using crypto? Are they using the traditional payment rails? What challenges or friction exists there if folks are trying to engage in commerce?
Yeah, I will address that. I do want to address, I can't help but address, like, there is a different point of view on where we are with the metaverse today. And I think, and it's helpful for some people, it's helpful for some of our clients. One point of view on where we are with metaverse today is we are at the beginning ending because of identity. So if you look at millennials and Gen Z, a majority of them, so people under 40, a majority, over 60% of them, care more about their digital identity than their physical identity. And I think it's a really helpful way to wrap your head around what's going on here, because even 20 years ago, we didn't care more about our digital identity than our physical identity. So you're walking into this world, you're spending your time and your energy in these sources. And that's why, the way in which you already spend money today, you're going to start with those tool sets, right? So what we see inherently is the way people are buying Roblox, the way people are buying these digital Nike assets, Balenciaga assets, are through credit card payments right now. However, in the future, as Nellie talked about, these kind of interoperable worlds. So what we have right now is Sandbox and Decentraland. You actually need to have the full experience. You need a crypto wallet. And a crypto wallet is confusing to people, right? There's a lot of steps to get to a crypto wallet. Then you want to talk about an NFT. Well, you have to, be on a marketplace. You have to have gas fees. You have to mint it. So there's a lot of barriers in figuring it out. What we know at the Harris Poll, for example, is that cryptocurrency literacy, the understanding of the awareness of it, is higher than the metaverse because we've been talking about it longer. So that's about 88% of Americans know what cryptocurrency is. About 72% know what the metaverse is. But when it comes to purchasing and buying things in these physical spaces, it stays around only 35% of the US population understands whether they're buyers or not, understands how to buy, cryptocurrency, how to buy digital fashion assets. And then the numbers really drop pretty low for virtual real estate and kind of the newer things like NFTs. So I think what's really interesting is payments obviously can change. There's lots of use cases for why cryptocurrency can exist, but ultimately people will go for convenience and what makes them feel safe and what makes them feel like they're getting the best safety, security, and guarantee. So we know that also from the research we've recently done with Mastercard globally is that people want more guarantees around cryptocurrency and where those fees and payments are going. But also that if cryptocurrency becomes more seamless, there's going to be a higher adoption of that. And something that an expert was talking to us about was, you remember how a lot of us were the first kind of generation who put our credit cards online and then made it single pay, right? And then you still taught your parents how to do that. Our kids, the meta natives or people's children of today, they're going to probably be, so seamlessly adapting to crypto that it will feel strange to us, but it will feel native to them. So I think we have to think about a world in which younger people think crypto first, they think identity first, they think immutable first when it comes to their assets like NFT.
Libby, there's a question here that gets at the point whether this is an experience that's reserved for the more affluent strata of the population. Do you have any perspective on that? And I think it's probably a multidimensional question because part of it is digital native element of it, right? It's not even if you're affluent, but you may not know how to access it, right? So could you just speak a little bit about the accessibility and equity element?
Oh, absolutely. So I think, first of all, this is something that Amanda and I talk about a lot, like something that we're both passionate about. So when you think about any wave of the internet that we've experienced, there's a massive wave of wealth generation that happens with it. And right now, there's only so many people who have financial literacy and digital access to either the hardware that you would need to be in the metaverse or the access, the broadband, the cloud. And so I think the question is, will the divide probably get bigger? Yeah, it will if we don't seriously address and figure out how to divide it. I think what's kind of interesting is like where you see crypto pickup is in markets that you might not necessarily expect. So Vietnam, Nigeria, Thailand, and there's obviously big markets in US and UK, but we see developing countries or the global South really picking up cryptocurrency. But I think for the metaverse, for example, there'll have to be more ways in which broadband is access to them, in which they get like 5G, 6G. And then there's a big call to developers to create more two-dimensional versions, which is it's a little hard to wrap your head around, like what would be the difference from the internet today? Those things are kind of hard to understand and for me to wrap my head around what the implications would be. But I think there's a big call for design equity in the future of that. And interesting things like in the Philippines, they have a play to game model so that the more gamers play, the more that they're creating equity in the game and the system and the more they're being paid back. And those are through kind of smart contracts backed on cryptocurrency. So there could be more monetization policies that impact different types of communities in different ways to kind of build more equity in the system, for example.
And to add on to that, so there's that side of things. There's also the side of, to become a program in today's society, you've got to get a master's degree, right? You need to have a certain amount of privilege to be able to get the knowledge to create these platforms and do the development behind them. But, when we think about these emerging economies around the world, like Libby mentioned, once we can hit, go surpass the curve of the hardware and the affordability and the connection, et cetera, this can allow people to become programmers themselves by getting into the games, creating, et cetera, and gaining that same type of education, right? So there's the potential to create more equity in that way. And then also think about, the fact that, many of us may be able to jump on a plane and jump to another country, or to be able to visit someone with a completely different experience and, enjoy that culture. For folks who can't do that, they're going to be able to travel, and you already can travel to different countries and places in the metaverse now, through gaming, through experiences. So being able to, expose more folks that don't have the equity to be able to take those luxuries and have those experiences to do that, or doctors who are training for surgeries in the metaverse, to be able to gain the experience there. So there's a lot of power in the metaverse in creating equity, but there could be a lot of barriers, and there's a lot of hype right now. I think once we can surpass that hype, that actually has a greater potential to create good.
Yeah, and like here's like an example in Dubai already, they have a metaverse hospital, right? That's online. But the potential of that, for example, could be in China, where they're having a medical shortage. Imagine that doctors are training in the Philippines, but they don't want to leave home. That's where they're from, right? And right now, in most cases, they would. In the future, they might be able to consult with patients in a metaverse-like experience, so they don't have to leave home, but they can still get, and maybe there'd be a smarter way to pay them that would inherently build more equity into their pay model. I mean, it all sounds pretty ideal, and I think it's important to recognize that. But I think that's kind of where we're at a point in the world, like where you scroll back contextually, there's a lot of disruption that is happening with the way that people think about values and equity and their cultural entirety. We're seeing from kind of our global trends. So it's kind of an important, we're kind of at an important inflection point of how do we want to design our next future, and how do we build equity, and how do we find ways that we work and stop, increasing the gap. I think a lot of people have been thinking about that. It's a really smart call out.
Thank you both. Amanda, over to you on the next question. Where do you think brands should be focused in the metaverse now?
Yeah, I think right now, I think it's important to have both a short-term and a long-term strategy, I would say. So on the short term, given that we're at this inflection point, like Libby mentioned, I think it's important for brands to start experimenting, getting a sense of the different worlds and the pros and cons of the different platforms, worlds that they want to come to life within. And there's already people flocking to these spaces. So I think it's important to think about what are the cultural events and moments that are happening, where people want to go and visit, and being a part of that cultural moment. I wouldn't think about it as like another advertising space. This is not just some place to throw up an outdoor billboard with, with your brand name on it. You want to be part of an immersive space. A great part about the metaverse is that it's constantly building and being created. So what can you allow folks to do to take part in to make it their own? I think that's really important right now, because consumers are giving permission to brands to experiment, try things out. I don't think this is, we're at a point right now where it makes sense to try to calculate ROI on your, your sales of your metaverse engagement. It's really about experimentation, but I think it does play a big role in terms of brand perception, in terms of being innovative, of experimenting and being culturally relevant, especially to those younger generations. On the long-term side, I would say thinking about kind of what is the tangible role that your brand can play in creating value exchange, adding to consumers' lives, and having a more kind of thought out long-term plan. And I would say the best ways to think about it is, I think everyone should get in there and start experimenting and playing around themselves, because then that can kind of open up your imagination and possibilities, and get the hardware that you need for your organization so you can start, experimenting and playing in these worlds and thinking about how your brand could come to life.
Thank you. So Nellie, and we heard multiple times that we're at the peak of the hype curve, right? The Gartner hype curve. So what would need to be true to reach the plateau of productivity, the adoption?
Well, you have the technological aspect of it. You basically need to have technology that would allow you to build the infrastructure. And that concerns everything from networks to hardware to having all this monetization and payments structures, figure out whether it's a combination of cryptocurrency and current, currency, or whether it's NFTs or whatever it might be, but building that infrastructure, and we're not there yet. And then the second part is adaptation, which is the consumers' basically comfort level in using and being part of those worlds and being part of the metaverse and adapting it. And it's kind of goes hand in hand. If we follow the Gardner's model of 5 stages in the technology development, the next stage after the hype typically is a trough where there are going to be a lot of failures and disappointments, and perhaps then the technology will start picking up, and there will be perhaps second, third generation of new technologies, and people will become increasingly more comfortable utilizing it. I always go to, in my mind, to the kind of example of Facebook, when, it started just as a dating app for Ivy League college students, and then suddenly it was adopted by the mainstream, and it became basically opened up a whole new world of social media. That's when the social media basically took off, despite the fact that we had MySpace and other apps before that. So at some point, it will have to be a perfect marriage of both technologies and infrastructure being in place and experiences of consumers. And I do believe that young people, teenagers, and young adults will be driving that force. Another aspect that I'm a strong believer is, once it becomes widely adopted in our educational system, that will be a major gateway for a metaverse to be adopted by families themselves. Once it becomes kind of doable and accepted by educators, and there are tremendous opportunities for schools to use metaverses. For just imagine the world where kids can travel both in time and space and visit, ancient Greece and Egypt and learn that way, and learn about archaeology and learn about history, and then do math equations in 3D spaces. I mean, the opportunities in the educational space are incredible. Amanda was talking about medical field, of course, as well, healthcare. But I believe once kids start bringing it home, that's when it will begin picking with parents as well. That's when parents and adults will become also kind of, think about it in a more constructive way. But I absolutely believe that that's the future. I agree with both what Libby and Amanda said. McKinsey estimates that by 2030, the metaverse contribution impact is going to be in the range of $5 trillion. It's, it's the size of the economy of Japan. So how we're going to get there, I'm not quite sure, but it seems like we're on our way.
I think that number keeps going out because, Amanda, I think last time we did the panel, it was 3 billion.
Yeah, yes. Now you can buy real estate in the metaverse. It's changing the whole game.
Now it's 5 trillion, so yeah.
Yeah, 5 trillion, quite a bit. Okay, so
think about the fact how much money has been poured just this year. I believe it's over $120 billion have been in investments only have been poured into the metaverse just this year. So it's, Yeah.
So I see a lot of questions around privacy, identity. Amanda, maybe I can ask you, in terms of potential downsides and risks, what are some of the things to think about as we observe how the metaverse evolves, and what implications does it have to commerce and payments in particular?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, with all these benefits of new technologies that connect us, enable our transactions, inherently there's going to be some level of risk. And, even when we think about the pandemic, the increase in cyber threats have increased by 81%. So just think if we're on an exponential curve of technology, think of that increasing as well. So, I think consumers will want to turn to the trusted technology partners and brand leaders that really stand behind safety and security when it comes to their transactions. Things like NFTs and new purchase behaviors around that as well. It's going to be important to ensure that people feel like they can safely and securely transact those, for those NFTs on our rails. So it's important to think about how we can unlock new ways to do that. And also, I would say, like earlier, I was talking about crypto, wanting to be able to buy that through your existing credit or bank provider is going to be able to give people more security and having that trusted relationship. So some of those risks in terms of fraud, identity, I saw a question in the chat of who will be the central source of identity. There's so much that is still yet to be unfolded with the metaverse. I wish I had the answer to that question. I do feel conflicted in that area that I talked about earlier about, the idea that metaverse is supposed to be purposefully set up to be a decentralized environment, but we are all individuals. So where will that role of identity come into play, and who will have a role in defining what that is, and what level of aggregation or centralization would be needed to protect us as individuals? A lot of it is yet to be figured out. I wish I had the answers, but there's not a lot of policy in place around the metaverse just yet, and a lot of that's being formed as we speak. So.
All right, we're almost at time, but I wanted to close out with a short and sweet question. So we had the solitaire for Windows mouse, we have Angry Birds for iPhone that kind of triggered wide adoption. Any ideas on what that killer app could be for the metaverse? I love, Nellie, your suggestion about education. I think that would be such a brilliant killer app to get us all into the metaverse, but I would love to hear your ideas. So Nellie, maybe you can go first.
For me, unquestionably, it's going to be an educational app, or at least adaptation of an educational world that would be the gateway for a wider adaptation by masses, by the adults.
Libby, do you want to go next?
Yeah, overall, I think the most exciting thing that will hit the metaverse probably in the next 5 years is when Apple launches their glasses or contact lenses or whatever it is. So I think that AR, like what Snap is doing with augmented reality, to be more applicable in terms of why people will adapt. So when I think of those applications, I think of either the big game changer for Apple will be that it will hit like fashion, and it will hit Coachella, or like something that people have to be seen, and we will redefine what's cool based on that, especially if you look at it the context of young people they want to be sustainable, so they don't want to buy a shirt like this, they want to swipe through it. Or health, so like just some sort of health indicator. Imagine we hit a new pandemic and a next threat, and this AR device could help us really understand and identify those threats. Like that would fly off the shelf. So I kind of think of more in the AR world versus the VR world in that way.
Mm-hmm. Amanda?
Yeah, I would say, often we think about the digital world as being cold and lonely and separating us all. And I get most excited about the spaces where this could actually transform us to be more close together in just a different kind of way that we don't know. So, there's already haptic vests and gloves and things like that. An example, I haven't seen my sister since before the pandemic. She's in another country, another side of the world. If I could give her a hug right now and she could feel like that, I think that'd be pretty amazing. There is a daily podcast around how the metaverse is being used to solve chronic pain issues. So being able to kind of block out the outside world and be in this space and, help you do exercises to deal with your chronic pain in this solitary environment where you're really focused on that can help you more than going to physical therapy, than medication and seeing all these doctors IRL. So I always get really excited about the idea that this can be like used for good. We just have to make sure it's aligned and created in the right ways to deliver that good. But that's where I get most excited.
And it's worth saying that those are already there too. It's just worth noting for people who don't know, like there's VR games for back pain, there's VR games for ADHD that have been approved by the FDA. So like we're here, we're in that world as we get there.
Yeah.
There's also Pokemon Go, where you basically, it's an AR game where, you kind of combine digital and virtual and real. So yeah, there are definitely proto apps and proto environments that are approximating that world.
Thank you to our wonderful panel. Now, Deb, I think we're out of time. I don't know if you want to open it up.
Well, we have a little bit of time for questions, and I know you hit a lot of the questions that were in the chat. I would invite the audience if you want to just unmute yourself if you have any questions. Some of the ones you asked about identity, so there was a very lively discussion about digital identity. Is it going to be the government? Is it going to be central? Is it going to be biometrics? Was a question that we could talk about. Somebody else asked, will the metaverse be any more decentralized than the internet?
That's the idea.
Inherently, yes, that's the way it's set up and it's supposed to be, right? There's these DAOs, de-autonomized organizations that make rules for their own kind of organization, but will that play out? I don't know. But supposedly that's the reason it's being created to be more decentralized. So
yeah, and it's worth noting that there's like Web3. It's like there's Web3 principles push against Web1. So if you think about Web2, so if you think about like Facebook or Instagram, Twitter, etc., they own your data, they own who you are. You've created a business in there. You decide that Facebook is not against your morals and you walk out of there, you lose your business, you lose everything. The idea of Web3, whether it's a metaverse experience or not, even if it's just a 2D experience, is the idea that you inherently own your data, that you inherently own your persona, your business, and that it's not owned by one person. So in this decentralized world, you can, as Nellie said and Amanda said, you can interoperably move. So you don't lose community because Elon Musk bought Facebook and is now changing the rules. You get to move with that. And that Web3 decentralization is more of a philosophy at this point. To Amanda's point, who knows if it's going to play out, because if Facebook gets their version of the metaverse, it's definitely not going to be decentralized, right? They want it in a centralized port. And so there's just a lot of tension now between what big tech wants and what consumers want. And we've seen a total flip on trust in that world. And it's probably one of the most interesting paradigm shifts.
Right. I don't know if this exactly relates, but Hey Hack said, isn't seamless integration exactly what Apple rejected as part of its business model to capture and monopolize customers? And Apple's always been a contrarian with everybody else, where they sort of held privacy. Any audience questions, or shall we switch to the networking? Some of the ideas that come up here is Money 2020 says it's going to be professional sports, cyber concerts.
One thing I would ask is just getting back to kind of the main theme of how one transaction in this space. Right now, many people are accustomed to transactions, and it's more my demographic. I mean, I'm an old guy, but the ability for one to contest, and you have a dispute, there's a way to adjudicate that transaction if you don't believe you did it. So for all this stuff to become mainstream, are people going to give up on that assumption that you can do such things, a disputed transaction? Or will we have to create a means to do that in this digital world?
If I may, absolutely, there will have to be some kind of governance, and that's one of the kind of issues about the infrastructure and about policies that will have to be set around it. Who's going to set those governance rules is an open question right now. And I think that people are trying to figure that out, but there absolutely has to be some governance around it. There has to be trust and safety, safety of your identity and all the assets that you might be accumulating there. So all of those questions are right now open questions. So I don't know if Libby and Amanda know the answers, but it's definitely something that people are thinking about and will have to be built into the metaverse system.
Yeah, and
oh, go ahead, Libby, you got it.
Okay, I was just going to say, I think also, like, to build on top of that, it's, as Nellie said, we're building out new rules and systems that operate. But, a lot of people are hopeful that blockchain and cryptocurrency are that they help get to there, right? Because the idea of cryptocurrency, or especially blockchain, if you look at just the utility of blockchain, the idea is that it adds a lot more transparency, and later, it's a ledger to every transaction in some cases. So you're able to see where things are going. And so you can imagine if I as a consumer have full transparency of that, and then you as a payment provider or something have full transparency of that, we are able to dispute that in a different way than we would before, because right now there's a lot of gray points of where I don't know where things are happening and why I'm disputing it in some cases. So hopefully that will create more transparency on the chain.
It makes it much harder to commit friendly fraud, which is I bought something and then I change my mind and I say I didn't buy it, which is first party fraud, actually. Okay. Thank you, panel. This has been great. I really, really appreciate it. It's been a really interesting discussion on an unusual topic. Bill Rutledge will be putting us, there's probably 5 different breakout rooms we'll go in. And how long are the breakouts? Are we going to do 2?
We would normally do, one for about 12 minutes, and then we'll do a second one for about 12 minutes.
Okay, so you'll get a notice so that you don't get cut off in the middle of a sentence. It'll say how many seconds you have left, and then you'll switch to a second room. Thank you.
Bye, thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Great, stand by and you'll be placed into a breakout room.